Welcome to the channel and to this deployment zone video. This is the show where I show you a model that I've painted recently and will be hitting my deployment zone in the near future. I've recently painted another Ironclad Dreadnought. This brings me up to 2. Ironclad Dreadnoughts are cool. Dreadnoughts are cool. Dreadnoughts have base 4 attacks. Ironclad Dreadnoughts with 2 close combat weapons, base 5 attacks, and with the seismic hammer on the side, that's a strength 10 AP1 attack, 5 attacks, 6 attacks on the charge, and with move through cover it nearly always makes its charge whether there's something in the way or not. On this particular Ironclad I've chucked on a Forge World Power Fist on the right arm there. It looks a little bit scrawny, but I like it. I wanted it to look a little bit different from my previous Ironclad Dreadnought, and you'll notice that this one is stock, 135 points stock. You can put Hurricane Bolters on the side if you really want to kill some hordes. I have ran Ironclads with Hurricane Bolters on the side, but they're not as effective as just throwing this beast forward and trying to get it in close combat and trying to mash up stuff. You can put 2 Hunter-Killer missiles on top, which will put it up to 155 points. And again, I've tried that before, but I'd rather keep it cheap and rather just throw it at things. It comes with a Stormbolter on this arm, Melter Gun on that arm. You can exchange the Stormbolter for a Heavy Flamer as well. So there's a number of different options on it. My previous Ironclad Dreadnought as well has got the grenade launchers on the front, and the grenade launchers give it assault and defensive grenades, which is interesting. So because when this charges through cover, even though it's got move through cover, it will strike at initiative 1 when it goes through, unless it has that grenade pack. And the defensive, and it also gives it defensive grenades. So when it gets charged, you'll lose your +1 attack for charging it. Not that very many people charge an Ironclad Dreadnought because they're quite fruity. So Dreadnoughts, front armor 12, side armor 12, rear 10. This is 13, 13, 10. You get an extra attack and you get move through cover. That's essentially what you get for an Ironclad, and it's 35 points more. And is it worth the cost? I would say yes, because as you know, frag grenades, strength 6, a lot of strength 6 weaponry out there, and with front armor 13, it means that this can be impervious to those frag grenades in close assault. It means if you drop this in amongst your enemy lines, it should, and I say should, survive a bit longer. If you're going up against Eldar, Dark Eldar with lots of lance weaponry, it's not going to care. They're not going to care too much about the armor 13. But in most cases, that armor 13 is rather telling. So I've played with lots of different versions of Ironclads, but for me, in my opinion, the best way to play it, the best way to run it is to keep it stock. You can stick the Hurricane Bolters on the side if you want to do that. If you face Orcs or Guard 90% of the time, then you might want to consider sticking the Hurricane Bolters there. You can put the 2 Hunter-Killer missiles on top, 2 one-shot missiles, strength 8, AP3, that fire a very long range, but why bother? Even if you do get both of them to hit, let's say both of them do hit and manage to wound or pen a target, 50% of the time, the unit that you're firing at will probably get a cover save. You can change the Siege Drill for a Chain Fist, which gives you Armor Bane. All its attacks drop down to AP2 instead of AP1. And Armor Bane sounds like it is more reliable at busting open vehicles, but trust me, when you charge a Land Raider, and I've charged quite a few Land Raiders with one of these, it will chew through a Land Raider in one assault. You don't necessarily need that Armor Bane to guarantee what you need to do. If most of your opponents, or most of the time, you're going up against super heavies, then maybe you want to bring an Armor Bane, armor busting Chain Fist on the side. But again, strength 10, AP1, even against Knights. On a 3 you'll glance at it, on a 4 you're penning Knights. You want that AP1 for that extra chance of those super heavies going boom. So in my humble opinion, the best way to run them is to keep them cheap, keep them stock. Deployment options, you can get these things in squadrons of 3. It is worth considering bringing a squadron of 3, leaving them at the back and just running forward. That is one hell of a threat range, and I imagine your opponents would tremble a little bit seeing 3 dreadnoughts in a squadron come charging towards them. It would be pricey, and they could be relatively easy to avoid if your opponent has a drop pod army or biker army or some sort of speed or ability to get away from them. So a couple of them at the back running forward, not necessarily the best way to deploy them. Second best way to deploy them, in my opinion, would be a drop pod. These things can take drop pods if they're in squadrons of 1. So I often drop these in a drop pod, but never on their own. There's always a second dreadnought or a second Ironclad Dreadnought coming in with them, which means you need 3 drop pods to guarantee 2 coming in the same turn. 2 dreadnoughts coming out of a drop pod in turn 1, turn 2 is a significant threat. Not only having a couple of monsters rampaging along your opponent's back lines is a good thing, but if your opponent, after you drop these in, if your opponent decides to focus all their firepower on taking out a couple of dreadnoughts, that means all the stuff moving up to get to where the dreadnoughts are, there's less volume of fire coming in to your rhinos, land raiders, whatever it is in your deployment zone, which is making your way towards the opponent. So they're one hell of a distraction unit because they are that scary. But remember the law of 2. If 1 is good, 2 is twice as good. Bring 2. Now, the best deployment option for an Ironclad Dreadnought, or any other kind of Dreadnought in my humble opinion, is chuck them on the back of a Storm Raven gunship. Of course, there is the worry that your Storm Raven comes in turn 4, and therefore it switches to veto mod in turn 5, and this only gets 1 assault off in turn 5, and then the game ends. That's nasty. It can happen. But when these guys come in turn 2 or turn 3, having one of these on the back of a Storm Raven can be a game changer. It is it's just a very good thing. It's my best way of introducing my opponents to a big nasty walker. One of the reasons why it can be so effective is because deploying from a Storm Raven is just joy in itself. You've got to remember that when you deploy, this thing moves 6 inches. So you move your base 6 inches away, and then the Ironclad can deploy anywhere up to 6 inches away from your base. It can be forward, it can be backwards, it can be in the building over there with move through cover. It's the threat radius around that after the 6-inch move is significant enough and means that this thing almost certainly smashes into close combat as soon as your flyer switches down into VTOL mode. It's almost a guaranteed charge there. That's pretty much it. Armor 13, move 3 cover and an extra attack is worth an extra 35 points. Chucking these on the back of the Storm Raven is probably the best way to deploy them, or chuck them in a couple of pods. Bring a couple of these bad boys and drop them in is probably the best way to deploy them. Don't worry about your Armor Bane Fist, don't worry about your Hurricane Bolters. Get those extra attacks in and just chuck these in. They will murder knights, they will kill knights, they will kill most things in close combat. Things that they should worry about: Hammonators are always a threat to everyone. Wraith Knights, of course, are always a threat to everyone, but saying that these units are scary to an Ironclad is a bit like saying that the sky is blue. They're scary to everyone. Monstrous creatures can, of course, smash attack an Ironclad, but that's 1 hit, and it's probably got a 50-50 chance of hitting it, unless you're Lawrence from Tabletop Tactics, then you're going to hit every single time. So these things aren't typically scared of monstrous creatures either. They're not very scared of many things. Ironclad Dreadnoughts. Anyway, that's a bit of tactica. Let's see how well he does against the Crash Test Marines. Let's see how well he does against a humble Space Marine unit. So here we have a 135-point unit versus a 200-point unit, a tactical Marine squad with a veteran sergeant with a fist, las cannon, and Ernie with his flamer there. I don't think the flamer's going to do very much this time. 200 points versus 135 points. So what can they do? Well, normally against a dreadnought you would bust the las cannon and chuck a grenade if these guys had the upper hand with shooting, but a grenade, a strength 6 grenade, is just going to bounce off the front of that Ironclad. So they've only got 1 shot with a las cannon, assuming that these guys can shoot first. Okay, so Brother Lucky Strike with his las cannon. Hits on a 3, that's a hit, and it's strength 9, and it bounces. And so the Ironclad gets to shoot back, Storm Bolter hitting on 3s. We've got 2 hits, wounded on 4s, no wounds, and then the melt gun, the nasty melt gun, misses. And then the Ironclad declares a charge. These guys can overwatch. Again, grenade will just bounce, so it's down to Lucky Strike hitting him on a 6 with the las cannon. Nada. Now we have the charge. That's a successful charge with a Strength 6 Hammer of Wrath, which does wound, and this guy's got a 3-up armor save. And he saves. Let's make some pile-in moves. And there they are all snugly. Now, against a normal Dreadnought, we could chuck a grenade if you're using that particular fac, or 9 grenades if you're not using that particular fac. But all these Strength 6 grenades are going to bounce off the front armour because close combat attacks go against the front armour of walkers. So it's all down to Sergeant Slap having a bust with his power fist, but he's initiative 1. The Dreadnought gets to go first. So 5 base attacks with its loadout and an additional attack on the charge with both weapon skill 4, so the Ironclad's hitting on 4s. And how many did he get? How many did he get? He got 3 hits, statistically average. Kills on 2s. 3 dead Space Marines. And then Sergeant Slap gets to punch back with his power fist. Veteran Sergeant, he's got 2 attacks. He's hitting on 4s. And he misses. So these guys lost the combat. Their leadership 9 minus 3 is 6. And they're sticking around. So now into round 2 of the combat. The Ironclad hits on 4s. Come on. 2 hits. Kills on 2s. 2 more Space Marines. Dead. Come on, Sergeant Slap. You can do something. Hitting on 4s. He hits once. Strength 8 Power Fist. He needs just a 5 to glance, 6 to pen, because, is that right, maths? I think I'm right. Let's add it up. 5 plus 8 is 13. That's a glancing hit. The Dreadnought loses its first hull point. 2 guys lost here, 1 guy lost there. These guys lost the combat by 1. Their leadership is 8. And they're sticking around again, which means Mr. Ironclad gets to rip them apart with his weapons again, hitting on 4s. This is going to sting. That was 4 hits. Wounding on 2s. 3 more dead. Let's take the last cannon away. By Lucky Strike. Down to 2 Space Marines left. Sergeant Slap, slapping away. 2 hits this time. 5's glance, 6's pen. Nothing. Nothing. So they lost the combat by 3, the Crash Test Marines. So their leadership, they got to pass a leadership 6 roll. And they're brave enough to try and fall back this time. Initiative roll off for the Crash Test Marines. 5, initiative roll off for the Dread. 3, they fall back. I think we can say that it's a successful combat. I don't know what turn we're in, but there's going to be some regrouping, there's going to be some shooting, but he munched his way through 8 of them after they got to fire first. It's asking a bit much for a las cannon to hit to pen and to blow it up in 1 shot. That's statistically improbable. And as we've seen, it's even asking a bit much for a power fist to rip it open, because it glances on 5s, pens on 6. Even asking a bit much for a strength 8 power fist, whereas this thing is just tearing through Marines piece by piece by piece. I think it's quite safe to say that an Ironclad versus a humble unit of tactical Marines in close combat is a foregone conclusion. These guys are mincemeat. However, if they were 48 inches away from the Ironclad and you had las cannon shot after las cannon shot after las cannon shot at it, there might be a chance then. So let's try that. Let's assume the Ironclad is 48 inches away and Lucky Strike gets to fire. And in the first round of shooting misses. So in round 2 he manages to find another shot on him and hits. Strength 9 bounces That's 2 rounds of shooting. In round 3, he manages to find bead an eye on him again and miss. Turn 4, he hits in turn 4 and doesn't pen. Turn 5, manages to hit again because this thing for some reason is still so far away in turn 5 and hasn't blown up yet. And it bounces. 5 turns of shooting. Turn 6. Turn 7, the game's going to end automatically after this point. Can you see what I mean? Yeah. A tactical squad, even with a las cannon, versus an Ironclad Dreadnought doesn't stand much chance. You need to get in there. You need melter guns. You need a Wraith Knight. You need LR. You need something. Lots and lots of Tau guns mainly. Fortunately for the Crash Test Marines, Dreadnoughts are normally their mates. So there you have it. Ironclads are good. Dreadnoughts are good, but Ironclads are better. That extra little bit of armor, that armor 13, does make a difference. And that extra close combat attack definitely does make a difference. I recommend, if you like your Dreadnoughts, definitely get yourself at least one Ironclad. And drop them in the backfield with another Dreadnought coming out of a pod or something. Or stick them on a Storm Raven. You will have fun. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wargaming.